the idea for Seed Library was, it was almost something that had been kind of gestating for quite a while, because it was almost a little bit of a successor to the work that we were doing at Cub. So Cub itself was an evolution of White Lion, and I think a lot of the things that happened with Cub kind of got cut short by the kind of pandemic. And kind of noticing over the pandemic how there was a real shift. I mean, it's not that I think that it changed kind of direction for people, but I think it fast-tracked a lot of the ideas that really started to manifest in what became Seed Library. So this whole movement towards, really wanting things that people can feel a little bit closer to, they can feel the kind of tactility of, or, it feels a little bit more real. And, that was something that I kind of felt very much in the air. It felt very universal. It felt like something that people were kind of tapping into in a multiple of different ways, and that's topics like sustainability, it's topics like kind of locality, it's kind of a connection to people, and it's also that kind of like desire for things that feel a little bit more kind of natural rather than overly kind of plasticized or kind of overly polished. So it really started to kind of hone those kind of thinkings that we'd had before. And all of that started to build up into this kind of opportunity we had to return to East London and open a bar. And that really is what kind of started to crystallize the thinking behind Seed Library. The name kind of is in kind of two forms, and I suppose it talks to the kind of two sides about what we tried to do, what we are trying to do with Seed Library. So the first word is obviously, seed. And, it's this idea of encapsulation. It's the idea of kind of starting points. And, one of the things that we looked at with Seed Library is kind of going, how do we remove some of our own bias? How do we look at the world of cocktails and food and think about how it could be from a different perspective? So we kind of stripped right back to almost the origin points of cocktails. And if you think about kind of like, the classic cocktails of the world, they're very Western dominated. They're based on ingredients that kind of been very prevalent within those cultures. And, everything stems from, sugar and citrus fruits and the same kind of spirits. Even things like the bitters, they're all kind of based on the similar styles of kind of roots and herbs and seeds and barks. So we wanted to think about what happened if we went back to that origin point and thought about how it would grow up along a different path. And that's where the kind of like seed word really started to reflect it. A seed obviously contains all the DNA of the plant that it's from, but depending on the conditions it's in, the situations it's in, it grows up in a slightly different manner. And that felt like a lovely kind of like analogy for what we were trying to do. And then the library part was, libraries to me are like bars. They're one of the last kind of like communal spaces, places where you can go where you don't need to belong to a certain club or a certain kind of part of society. They're there to be kind of meeting places and sharing places, and this idea of an exchange of knowledge. And, particularly with Seed Library, we're trying to kind of understand different points of view, different sets of knowledge, and the idea that it could be something that we could kind of learn from, but also share. And so it just kind of came together as a kind of couplet. Obviously, Seed Libraries exist in the world, but being able to have it from kind of this bar perspective felt really, really lovely to us. And I liked the words. It's kind of a bit funny, though. I spoke with the team. We end up, having the various projects around the world, put little abbreviations in when we're chatting to different parts of the team, and kind of worked out that all the bars now contain the letters LS or SL. So it makes it doubly confusing when you're talking to one of the other teams and they're like, we need this for SL, and I'm like, which one is that? I think it's something that we're constantly learning about. I think the path is different for each cocktail. It's different for each step of learning, but essentially we're trying to, I think there was a lot of period from when I was a young bartender. I love classic cocktails. I still kind of like use those as my kind of foundation of a lot of things. But I did become a little frustrated by the kind of formulaic approach of going, okay, this is how we make a drink. Depending on whatever ingredient we get, we put it into the formula of a sour or a fizz or a cocktail, and we use that DNA to kind of base out. And it kind of erases a bit of kind of nature's wonderful variance. It might have a completely different acidity and sweetness balance. It might have a different texture. It might behave differently around different ingredients. So it's trying to go, well, of course classic cocktails are wonderful and they're a great starting point, but what else could we look at? What could be a different form of a cocktail? So as we've taken these ingredients, and often we're using things that, you know, we're not hugely familiar with. They might be a different variety of citrus, but they also might be a completely different pulse or seed or nut that we've kind of used or kind of grown up with in our cuisines. So it's trying to understand what's the best way and the most kind of fitting way to kind of do justice and pay respect to that ingredient. And that is about looking at a new path. And so as we've been exploring with these ingredients, as we've been learning, you know, partly it's taking different kind of knowledge sets. So it's speaking with everything from farmers and indigenous growers to different cultures and the way that they use it in their cuisines or drinks, and trying to think about how we can obviously still reflect our own personalities and our own backgrounds, but learn from these different kind of perspectives and shift the drink into a different lane. I think there's always a danger of over whisking the souffle, as a friend would often say. It's like, you know, you're kind of, you've got to keep focus on what's the important part, and that's kind of creating connections for our guests. And if you overcomplicate something, if you lose some of that fun, and that's applicable to us as well as creators, you know, you don't want to kind of make it overly academic or kind of keep like focusing in on something, because, you know, that can get either navel gazing or it can drive you insane when you're just kind of going down that obsessive path. And so it's always a balancing act of going, does this still feel fun? And it has to feel fun for both us and the guest. It has to be accessible. It has to be something that feels like they can connect to it. You know, I've talked to the team a lot about the fact that the unexpected is delicious. You know, that's a big part of deliciousness. But weirding people out, alienating them, making them feel belittled, that's the opposite of delicious. So we need to make sure that we're hitting that right tension point of it feeling exciting and different to them, but not feeling something that they, can't connect with. And in the same way for us, we can't lose track of the fact that, as you say, like these things come from our backgrounds, our love for this industry, our love for ingredients and flavors and all those things. So we need to make sure that there's enough playground for everybody in that. But I think, you know, being able to explore new ground is certainly not at the expense of that balance. And I think it's actually, you know, the thing that I've been really proud of with the teams is seeing how much they, you know, really get into the kind of that creative process and that purposeful creativity rather than, you know, just throwing stuff together. You know, yes, of course that can be fun, but often that can be wasteful and sometimes just doesn't lead to the most delicious things. You know, there is a reason those classics exist, is because they were kind of honed recipes that could be passed down over time, and you know that there was a kind of dependency to them. So what can we do that's, you know, still feels like it's got that sense of kind of playing around and trying new things, but isn't just kind of throwing stuff against the wall and seeing what sticks. I think in all of our bars there is a degree of kind of precision. We put a lot of care into the setup of our bars, the way that they work, and, you know, that's to enable the team to be able to interact with guests better. A lot of the work that we do to put in kind of like preparations, mise en place, the setup of the bar is about enabling dialogue for the teams. But I think there is in the other bars, you know, the way that we focus the ingredients, it's become about representing a facet that we're polishing down to. And I think White Lion was a very good example of this. And, you know, Alex, who runs things across the company, he's big boss for all things Lion. He talks about White Lion as being quite digital. And, you know, I think that's a nice way of describing the fact that we represented everything in the way that we wanted a White Lion. We controlled everything down to the water. So it was kind of fanatical, kind of being able to not say it's better, but this is our version of something as we put it forward. With Seed Library, it's kind of the opposite. It's kind of embracing the fact that nature is fuzzy. We don't need to polish it to that degree. We want to let there be that slight imperfection, that kind of, I talked to the team about keeping the fuzziness. You know, how do you retain some of those kind of bits without needing to polish it to the nth degree? You know, how can there be something that's got that little bit of funk underneath the surface, or has that slightly rougher texture, but there is a beauty in it? As long as it still balances, there's something really lovely in that. But, that's very much the drink approach and the feeling of the bar. I think everything that we wanted to have in there was this kind of soft, warm touch, and we wanted things that feel like they had like this maker's imprint on it. Of course, we're applying that to the cocktails, but it's in the decor, it's in the music, even the spirits that we have on the back bar. We're trying to have things that kind of embrace those idiosyncrasies. So be it a single cask thing or a small batch or something that feels like it does have that reflection of somebody's touch. And, the wines that we have are fairly low intervention. We've got beers that are made locally that have a little bit of that, again, that fuzziness to them. So I think as a guest experience, all of these things have this slightly more analog feel. I mean, we've got an amazing music partner with Love Vinyl in the space, and a lot of the things that we play are vinyl and music that leans towards kind of a lot of world music, a lot of things that aren't that like hyper polished, like kind of super saccharine poppy style, but it's more about that kind of like fuzz to it. And I think as an experience then for both the team and the guests, there is something that feels a little softer and more relaxed. And, we wanted something that the space that you get as a guest in the bar is quite a lot. It's, we wanted something that felt like your own little world, that you can escape from all of the noise of outside and all of the chaos that's going, particularly in the busyness of Shoreditch. You could kind of retreat to something that felt, a lot more like a home away from home. And I know that's a very kind of common thing to say in bars. Everybody tries to create this kind of lounge space that could be that home away from home. But it's lovely to see how much guests have kind of, reiterated that or embraced that feeling as they come to the bar and hang out there for the whole night. I think some of it is a reaction to COVID. The conversations I had with friends, there was things that you're seeing echoed around the world. It wasn't just a kind of London or UK thing, where people needed that feeling of like connection, that organicness. People were making things like sourdough at home. They were booming their plants to kind of like turn their homes into like a mini greenhouse. They were, looking for things that gave that sense of, slightly more kind of honest feel about, the kind of experiences they wanted to surround themselves by. And, I think that was, again, I don't think it was something that was brand new to people. I think it was a feeling that they had that was just accelerated by the pandemic. And I think it was something that they, we certainly saw a yearning for. People were getting things delivered to their house, and it came in all of this packaging. They became aware of things in a different way. We had global food crises. Like we've had all of these things that I think have helped people understand a little bit more about what was happening around them, and the fact that they didn't necessarily want those things in their lives. They didn't want things to be overly sanitized. It had just been a kind of consequence of kind of living before, and that period to reflect and go, actually, I don't want these things. I want things that feel a little bit more real, was something that we tried to provide for people. Music's always been a massive thing for the whole company. I think everybody who's been part of, been attracted to work with us, music's almost been kind of like the kind of parallel to their kind of loves. And, it was very much, to me, like something that we've kind of helped define the character of each of the spaces. But with Seed Library, there was something quite rebellious about it. Again, that fits very much of being part of East London. And even though it's, it's a soft rebelliousness, it's not a big punk style bar, but it's got this whole kind of like trying to kind of embrace the counterculture. It's trying to be part of something that swims against all of that kind of movement towards kind of sanitized plastification of stuff. And I think the kind of one of the amazing movements, and we look to it not necessarily in the music stylings, but very much the kind of culture that surrounded it, was the kind of rave culture that was part of East London. And it was one of the first things that we talked to when we were chatting with both Jaco and the design team for the physical space, but also with Magpie for the kind of visual design of the bar, was this idea of that movement, what happened around that, this idea of things that wanted to kind of go against the mainstream, not to kind of stick two fingers up to it or anything like that, but to kind of demonstrate that there was a yearning for something else. There was a feeling that was, against what else was happening in the world. And, there was something in that iconography, the way that it was communicated to people, that idea that it tapped into something that, everybody said didn't exist in the world or wasn't part of the desire, but clearly was. And so it was something that we used as a little bit of a guide in terms of both the visuals and the feeling and, I suppose, the ethos of the bar. So I think with Seed Library as an experience, all of the team that we hired, we're very fortunate to have teams that have worked with us for a long time, and they understand the way that we do things, but we're also keen to do something different. It's a different character to the other bars in the family. And we wanted to have something that felt quite East London. And for those unfamiliar with that is more about it was the creative area of London. It was something that was very much kind of born out of this younger set who couldn't afford to be part of the kind of mainstream, wanted to do things differently, created spaces that kind of catered to an other. It was something that felt very much kind of approachable, yet purposefully trying to do something differently. And I suppose that's kind of a character that we wanted to embrace, but we wanted to have that ease and that kind of like informality of an East London space, but with this kind of like, I don't know, this soft welcomingness to it. I think there's certain aspects of East London that can feel too cool or can feel a little bit standoffish. And we wanted something that really just kind of, I talked about it feeling like a home from home. One of the things that we talked about with the design of the space and the seating was you could obviously take in the environment around you, and the music and the lighting, all of that kind of helps build this kind of really relaxed, soft kind of like setting. But it could feel like you're in your own little world. You're kind of like pulled into, even the lighting of the table, the colours. We talked about it being almost like a little bit 50s to 70s, but almost like the futuristic feel of that. A bit of kind of Kubrick meets, I don't know, like a 70s lounge. So it's kind of like trying to find something that, kind of created this draw in that you could create your own experience. And then having things that had this softness to it, there's snacks, there's kind of beers, wine, sake. It doesn't matter what you're kind of in for as an experience. You can kind of like release and kind of let go of all of the madness of the world. And even the way that you come into the bar, we've got our own entrance on Shoreditch High Street. You descend down the stairs. It feels a little surreal. You're not quite sure where you're going. You go down quite an industrial kind of fire escape. You're down these stairs. It's very dark. And then all of a sudden you kind of like reveal into this kind of like really, it's got lots of like ambers and kind of like deeper kind of tones that are very kind of warming. So as an experience, I just want people to feel like they've kind of gone through this kind of different kind of portal into something that they can kind of forget about the chaos of the world and the busyness of all of that, and really have something that allows you to feel part of something that hopefully feels quite special, but really can cater to whatever need you have coming into the bar. It's a short menu, so we have 12 cocktails that we rotate, some of it weekly, some of it shorter than that, some of them we keep on as kind of like mainstays if we can get hold of enough of a product. But everything has this kind of maker's touch to it. So there is a familiarity. As I said before, it's not about alienating people and being like, well, I don't know what to order, I don't know what it's going to taste like. We want to make sure that it still has an accessibility. But everything has this kind of, I've got to find a better way of describing it than fuzziness to it, because that's the only way I keep kind of coming back to it. But, it might be, some of it's quite simple. We have a drink called Raspberry Champagne, which is an amazing eau de vie that's produced down in the Cotswolds. That's, there's a bit of raspberries in every shot of eau de vie that goes into the drink. It's, incredibly concentrated, but, the work that Barney does is to represent more than just the kind of sugars of the fruit. It's everything from the florality of the raspberry, the kind of broken leaf green note to it, that slight kind of nuttiness you get from the seeds. It's all of that breadth, a little touch of lactic acid lengthened with champagne. And so it does taste like raspberries and champagne, but there is this kind of complexity to it and a depth to it that if you want to seek that out, there's layers to explore. But if you want to have something that's just kind of like a clean aperitif, it's a wonderful, clean, dry champagne cocktail. All the way through to stuff that, I'm trying to think what's on the moment. We had an Americano that used some Datarini tomatoes that we fermented, so we preserved them to kind of, while that season's quite short, being able to kind of hold on to them and kind of like retain, the kind of wonderful kind of complexity of that fruit. But we do a light fermentation on it that really pulls out really a lot of the fruitiness. It starts to kind of lean towards kind of strawberry notes, but you still get a little bit of this kind of like tannic edge from the skins of the tomato, and we fold that into an Americano. So it still behaves like an Americano. We're not just doing the simple kind of Campari sweet vermouth kind of base, but it's got that bittersweet kind of dry combination that you want in that kind of aperitivo style of cocktail. But it just is kind of takes on a very different profile. So it's about a kind of a relatability and something that people can understand. But if they want to explore, there's a lot more complexity behind each of the drinks. But again, with it's not as heavily involved as something like we do at Lioness, which is much more kind of detailed in terms of the preparations, and it's not quite as loud or pop playful as what we do at Super Lyan over in Amsterdam. So it sits between, there's a familiarity, but there is a depth to explore in each of the drinks. And again, that applies to the wines, the beers, spirits, can of course make you classic cocktails, but all the products that we have in the bar are designed to have like a lot of breathing room through the ingredients. In some ways, it is the young rebellious child. I think it's, we wanted it to feel different and a challenge for us as well. All of the venues speak to their location. They are born out of the place that they are. And I think with Seed Library, it is born out of East London's character. There is something about it that has this, like an edginess to it that feels quite different. And I think that is very much where it sits within the family of the bars. I think Super Lyan's are most playful. It's very much about the kind of character of Amsterdam and the optimism that abounds that kind of, not only that city, but that, the kind of country's culture. And it's got this little bit of a, throwback, pull it out, explode it, hence the name Super. Silver Lions, it's this idea of, the Americas, and particularly DC as the capital of the Northern America, being this kind of like exchange point, this meeting point for different ideas. And so it balances a lot of seemingly contradictory ideas. It's very grand, but it's got a lot of rawness to it as well. And then Lionesses are kind of most, very much our most pioneering in terms of the work that we do. It's on the South Bank, so it's got this beautiful view over the Thames and it's got a grandness to it. But it's the character of being this kind of, like the Lioness, this host and hunter. It's very much about how to make the weird feel accessible, but it's very, the things that we have at Lioness are certainly in the weird account of things. So it's, it's nice to have this spread, and, it's the thing I particularly love. Obviously the bars exchange ideas and they communicate, and there is this, family of kind of ideas that gets kind of passed around. But the fact that they all have a different character, they all work on different things, mean, there is wonderful learning opportunities. They aren't cannibalizing on each other. They are doing things that feel very different. So it's a real opportunity for them to have different characters and to kind of breathe into that work to reflect that. I mean, there's always ideas. I mean, I think when we were opening White Lion, I had about 6 or 7 bars that I thought would be quite timely for then, that would have been great to open. But the world evolves, and one of the things that we've always loved is the people and place character of what that does to influence our venues. So, if an opportunity came up in a different part of the world, it wouldn't be about shoehorning an idea into that. So although I think there are, I suppose, things that are missing from the kind of character set that we would love to do, but I think it's more about finding something that feels a appropriate, and that is about time, place, and people. So I think we'd really. The answer is yes and no, basically. So yes, of course, there is a ton of other venues that I would love to do, and that explores different characters, different opportunities, different ways of kind of pushing our creativity. But it would never be about going, we've got this idea, we're going to just push it into a place. And similarly, I always get inspired by our travels, places we visit, the people we meet, the things that we try. And so there would be, oftentimes I've come back from a place and be like, love to open a bar there. It'd be amazing to use those ingredients or to embrace that kind of style and approach of hospitality they have, or these people are amazing, it'd be amazing to work with. So there's always that excitement, but there's nothing on the horizon just yet. The US is always fascinating in that way, because each city, each state, everything has its own kind of culture and approach. But I've had that feeling coming back from so many travels. Some of the ingredients I've been able to try, and I talk a lot about kind of Mexico, Australia, or Japan, because I think those were very different to me. I got to explore in a way that was very fascinating. I'm about to go to India at the end of the week, and I know that there's going to be ingredients that blow my mind, and different approaches to hospitality that are going to be really inspiring. So it's it's all about kind of making sure that we could do it in an authentic way, though. We wouldn't just want to kind of open a venue for the sake of it and not be able to support it, not be able to kind of work with that team and that culture, or to be able to add something to the mix. We're certainly not of the opinion that we can just open bars anywhere and that will be what works. We want to make sure that we can kind of authentically be part of a local scene and a culture and work alongside whatever's going on in that space. It hasn't been what I expected. I think there's inevitably, the beauty of venues is they are chaotic. They're living, breathing things, and they best laid plans. It's always the case with venues. But Alex and I often joke that it probably takes 3 years for a Lyan venue to really bed in and start to be its own character. And I've been so happy to see how Seed Library has fast-tracked that. We've understood it better, we've been able to communicate it to people better, the teams that we work with have been able to talk about it, communicate it better. So I think we've learned over the years about how do we explain what we're trying to do. And there's difficulty in that, because often when we create a venue, it comes from quite a personal or intimate feeling. There is you're observing something and you think it's the way the world behaves, and you're trying to reflect something, but it's hard to kind of pull that out from yourself. And I always love working with Yaku on the kind of spatial design, Magpie on the kind of visual design, to try and find ways of bringing that communication to life, that emotion to life. And I think with Seed Library, we did a good job of kind of explaining what it was about quicker than usual. And so we were able to get the bar, the teams, the product to a place quicker than we usually have done. Lioness is now 4 years old, and I think we're now starting to really reflect the character of what it is. And it took a long time to get to that point, and I think it is something that usually takes quite a lot of time. So I'm really, really happy that it's kind of come through very quickly as it has with Seed Library. That said, there's plenty more that we're still trying to explore, and it does take time. We opened a basement venue in East London, and we had the hottest summer on record, and we had to learn about what that means, and the space that we're in, and how are we going to make it be part of the local community. And there's more work to be done on that, and we've never very thankful and very happy with the success of the bar so far, but would never just kind of be like, right, the work is done. We've got to be kind of continuing to work on how do we communicate things better, how do we learn, how do we connect, how do we find ways to kind of amplify the work that we're doing. That's a great question, and I think everything that we try and do with the venues is to try and be part of the wider conversation as an industry, but also to kind of kick off discussions that we think are important. And I think the work with Seed Library that we've reflected on, that I think, in the conversations I've had with peers and friends over the years, over the last year with Seed Library, is on this idea of bias, is the fact that, there's a lot of discussions around the world at the moment to do with, the manner in which social media works, that we create these kind of echo chambers. We create this sense of hearing things that reinforce our own perspectives, or, don't allow us to kind of like step outside kind of different kind of like outlooks. And I think there is a danger in the food and drink world, especially as more outside influences starting to come into it. It's starting to become much more mainstream. There is a lot wider understanding. The people who are investing in bars, who are creating the awards, who are doing all these things, is expanding as a net. And there's so much positives to that. But there is also a caution that we need to kind of like reflect on. And, the last thing that I would want, given the diversity of people that come into this industry, the wonderful breadth of creativity there is, but also the need that we have to open this up to a wider audience and to demonstrate that a career in hospitality is a viable long-term thing for people to kind of attracted to, means that we need to retain as much breadth as possible. We need to avoid at all costs just homogenizing the industry and becoming cookie cutter, that we all do the same style of things, we use the same equipment, we buy the same ingredients, and it just, you can get the same drink anywhere in the world. You don't want to erase all of that kind of wonderful breadth. And so being able to kind of encourage the idea of reflection on your own bias, and think about, why do we only value certain knowledge sets? Why is it seen as like, the canon of a great cocktail to use these ingredients, this type of ice, this glassware, this whatever it is, all of these things, to question that, and to realize that there are so many different forms of knowledge out there that we've kind of overlooked. You look at some of the indigenous spirits or indigenous food sets, and those things aren't becoming part of like mainstream cocktail culture. And it's trying to make sure that we're kind of understanding the fact that we are being blind to those things, and also welcoming those different sets into the whole, so we can all learn, we can all balance things differently. And it's not that everybody needs to adopt those different perspectives, but we do need to value them. And so with Seed Library, we're trying to encourage that kind of wider outlook, and also in a much more granular sense, to get people to think differently on what drinks can be. Why do we need to only use certain fruits to kind of make our sours? Why are we, polishing things down so we're removing that variance, or we're just using the same formulae regardless of the fact that nature can provide a different, balance in that ingredient? So it's, in some sense, it's kind of like a grand desire to kind of help the industry think widely, but also on a practical level, it's trying to get bartenders to kind of focus on their drinks in a different way, and understand that balance isn't one set of things. They can reflect their own characters, their own loves, the things that excite them, but they don't need to just adjust to this kind of global set of balance, and they don't need to go, okay, this is how I get into the award circuit, or, this is what I need to do to get into a certain article. Hopefully will mean that they are providing things that feel richer for their guests. And that's something I think is quite important. I mean, absolutely. I think there is a key role as a bartender is an educator, and that's not that we're there to kind of like impose on a guest's night out, but we are there to take them outside their comfort zone. If we just kind of pandered, we'd be serving the same 5 drinks all around the world. It'd be espresso martinis, margaritas, gin tonics, and so forth, and all grand. And there's like a lot of positives to the fact that people are if I think back 20 years ago, people weren't coming into a bar and ordering those drinks. So it's great to see that they've become established. But we do want to help them understand that there's a world of flavor out there, and we can be that kind of conduit for them. And, absolutely it's about kind of educating and helping guests, and this not only has an important impact on the happiness of that guest, but it's important for our food systems. We do need to demonstrate that, okay, we shouldn't just be buying mass-produced, mass-grown, the same fruits and the same sugar and all the same things that are going into all the drinks. There should be a diversity. There should be, a seasonality. There should be these things that help support a much wider network of producers rather than just a very narrow set of the same things over and over again. I think I've talked a lot about some of the kind of grander goals about what we're trying to do. And I think there's a danger of it sounding very lofty as a bar. And I think the thing about all of our bars is they're genuinely fun. And I think we always have enabled our teams to be themselves. And some of the nicest kind of comments that we get back is like, people talk about how human it feels to come into our bars. They have a great time, they have a genuine rapport, they chat to somebody and they've been helped and have this great night out. And that to me is what a bar is about. It's not about the product, it's not about like the drinks that we're putting out or the concept. And so, the thing I love about Seed Library is it's, I joked with Alex that we've created a bar that we just wanted to hang out in. It's the music's amazing, it feels so comfortable. Like, you can just go in and have a glass of wine and it just feels wonderful. I love pubs. Those to me, they're like some of the most magical places because they're just a place to hang out. They feel relaxed. There's no pretentiousness to it. It's just a meeting point for people. And that's what we've tried to create in this bar. So even though that we've put a lot of care and hard work into the background of it, and, there are these kind of like important lessons I would want the industry to kind of take on board. Ultimately, as an experience for a bartender, for a guest, for a general member of the public, it's a really ace bar to hang out in. And I think that's the kind of real achievement of it, is having something that feels comfortable and accessible is quite hard. That's not something that's a given. It's making people. And, we always try and make them as democratic as possible. So how do you make as many people as possible feel comfortable in a space? And I think the team have smashed it out of the park with that. It feels wonderful to feel part of, and I'm so excited to see them grow in that kind of like opportunity. That space to be able to have something that you don't quite know what's going to happen when you go down to that bar and you're just going to have a great time. That's the real expertise in what they've created.